Hey, and welcome back to the channel. Most realtors are decent at selling homes, but still feel stressed about money, taxes, and cash flow. Today, I'm sitting down with a realtor who's a friend of mine, Zach Johnson, who's actually living this day to day. And we're going to talk about what most agents don't learn about when running their business, sometimes until it's too late. So, Zach, I want to talk about why most realtors feel broke, even if they're already earning six figures as a realtor, and maybe some of the mistakes that agents see. Welcome to the show, and just thank you for being here.
Daniel, thanks for having me. Certainly, definitely in this industry, a lot of folks are, you're not taught in real estate school, how to plan and be successful when it comes to, finances on the back end. But I feel like a lot of people fail just because in this business, you are self employed, you're a 1099 contractor. And when you see a commission check hit, taxes are not withheld out of that or any other expense on the front end. So, budgeting for that, planning for that are usually not conversations out of the gate in this business, but rather than when you start increasing your income, you start thinking about avenues like that. So that's one reason I feel like people fail. But overall, I mean, it's a tough industry, and you really got to be around the right people and network in this business to do well.
Absolutely. Zach, I want you to take a moment to just kind of explain the type of real estate that you work with as a realtor and maybe share one or two of your biggest challenges the first year or two as a newer entrepreneur in the real estate industry.
Sure. So I've been in the business 6 years now, and I have learned a lot. My first few years in the business, my biggest challenge honestly was just building relationships within this business, knowing other real estate professionals, building rapport with home inspectors, pest inspectors, all the things that are involved with transacting real estate. Those things matter to make deals go smoother for consumers. In 6 years I've made those, so it's been great to transact real estate and make it seamless for both buyers and sellers. So I transact residential real estate and multifamily, and I've also helped some folks in the commercial sector as well. So trying to expand knowledge in different sectors and provide folks value, but primarily residential real estate.
Now, what got you into real estate originally as an entrepreneur?
Great question. Great question. I'm going to give credit and kudos to this one to my wife. Out of college, my biggest dream and desire was to be a physical therapist, and that door never opened. From that point forward, I worked for the university here in town for 4 years, and we bought our first primary residence at that time. And then about 3 years later, we bought our first investment property. I opened with, how real estate had appreciated over that short period of time. And, our experience with this first investment, which was a duplex, was very eye opening. And I'm very into finance and numbers and tracking. And my wife encouraged me to get my real estate license. So I did. And the Lord opened up a door. I was in a small little Bible study here in our community, and a local insurance agent connected me with another real estate agent who was producing. And I basically was his right hand man and also produced at the same time to learn the ropes of this business. And here we are, off to the races.
That's awesome. What surprised you most about the business side of being in real estate or being a realtor, would you say?
Surprises to real estate. I think one of my biggest surprises is just all the different complexities of how people run their business in this industry. There are a lot of realtors out there that will pay for leads and, prospect all day long and try to convert, people. That's not specifically how I built my business. It's all been relationship, word of mouth, just pouring value into people that I know, like, and trust, and just being actively involved in the community. But that would be one.
I know you mentioned the investing in a duplex. You have multiple properties. You've told me that before. Or what do you think about realtors that just get into the business and just become a realtor? They don't flip properties. They don't invest in properties. They're only brokering real estate. What would you say to those that have that mindset?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great place to start, is just learning the ropes of the business before, dipping your toe into the investment world. But in this industry, I feel like, it's 24/7. You're self-employed. So you kind of feel like when the phone rings, you have to answer it, and you feel like you're always going. And the vision that I have for my life and for my family is not to run 24/7. So the way that I mitigate that would be, to purchase investment property, and over time that provides tax benefits such as depreciation, but also provides appreciation and cash flow. So that's been a huge part of our journey. It kind of takes some of the weight off on the sell side, just knowing that you own assets and it occupies some of your time. But it also is very exciting when you're, looking at your own deals and trying to underwrite them, and you learn things under that process over the years. But as you start out, that's just not feasible for all people, but definitely something I would encourage, advising to at least think about, because I'm sure you will have an investor reach out that wants to buy something, and then maybe that would open up your mind to maybe wanting to do that same thing for yourself.
Zach, how have you gone about managing your time since, being a realtor is being self-employed and running a business, and then having investment properties is a business in and of itself. A lot of people that get into investment properties don't realize that. You have a family, you have investment properties, you have your realtor business. How do you manage your time? What are some of those practical things that you do to manage your days, your weeks, your months, and your year as a whole as an entrepreneur?
Sure. I'm a pretty structured guy. I like to hit the ground in the morning, with a workout or a devotion, and have some time with my kids prior to going to school. But other than that, everything I do and I live, breathe, and die by it is on a schedule. So my calendar, if I was to show it to you, is time blocked from hour to hour, 30 minutes to 30 minutes. So I live and die by that calendar. So any meetings, consultations, appointments, changing hair filters, all of the above, and then obviously having a CRM to assist with that, to set reminders and to keep me on track is basically how I operate from day to day. And it's just a simple action of when you meet with somebody and you have follow up to do, you have to record it and make a plan and just put it on your schedule. And that's what I do. And when it's on my schedule, I simply just do it. So it seems very simple, but that's how I've built my business. I love that the simplicity about it, and it works for me.
I know as an entrepreneur, one of the necessary evils, I guess, if you will, of being in business is all things related to administration and taxes. It's February currently, February 2026 right now, which tax season, is here. And I think for a lot of most new entrepreneurs, they're surprised at all the different taxes, all the different tax and administrative tasks they didn't anticipate having to do to run their business and stay compliant. For you in your business, being that you have a couple different things going on, how have you learned to manage and handle your taxes, whether it's quarterly or your annual taxes, things of that nature?
Sure. So I have a CPA and an accountant. I did not out of the gate, so I think I'm more of I'm a sponge when I'm around other people who are producing. So when you're in a room with people, you just have to kind of have the mindset to ask questions and learn along the way when you're early out of the gate. But as you um, progress in the business and you become further along, I would advise hiring a CPA. A CPA is a very key integral part to this business in terms of helping you manage taxes, but those are all paid quarterly. You got to pay into that. So they're always looking at your income and expenses, and they do your bookkeeping for you. So they're going to keep you ahead of the curve. The last thing you want in this business is, a large tax bill at the end of the year that's going to stress you out, or you have to, set up payments, or it leaks into other years. So having a CPA and accountant is worth its weight in gold, and I would say it's worth every penny out of the gates. I would just get in the habit of go ahead and just planning for that and doing it immediately.
Absolutely. What would you say for realtors, for new realtors, they tend to maybe underestimate early on in the business?
I think they overestimate, how easy it is. I feel like in this industry, people see, the paydays and the paychecks. I've seen a lot of people in the industry of the 6 years that I've been in here come and go. And I think that's just due to the consumers not realizing, or other agents not realizing, how much work it really goes into serving somebody through identifying a home, through due diligence of that home, what due diligence look like, sewer scopes on properties, pest inspections, roof inspections, plumbing inspections, like the list goes on. And back to my earlier comment, you have to have those pipelines of tradesmen to be able to get those things looked at efficiently and effectively within the due diligence window. So I feel like people early on just don't look at all the work that needs to go on. They kind of see showing houses as fun. I like real estate, but not all real estate's pretty, and not every deal is pretty. I think you just get the reality when you get into the business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How does inconsistent income affect your decision making in your business?
Inconsistent income out of the gate was, in the beginning, I thought about it a whole lot more, but the way that we manage money and finance, we budget everything out. So I really don't think about, where the next income paycheck is coming from. We have built up a nest egg, which has been great. And we just try to operate by that. I know a lot of folks in this industry, they get a large paycheck, and some people, spend the large paycheck. So that's something that I would be fearful of, just because, as you said, income fluctuates in this industry, and that's not something that I would want to, not a position that I would like to be in. So I think it just goes back to money 101 in terms of budgeting, especially when I have a family. I have three little boys.
I love that. Yeah, budgeting as for any family is super important, but as an entrepreneur, I think even more important regardless of size, whether you're just a solo entrepreneur and
Mhm.
realtor, for example, self-employed, or whether you're running a multi-million dollar a year business, the types of companies that I work with that are clients, you know, having a budget is so important. Those guardrails, that planning for expenses, planning for income, and setting goals and targets and working towards them, tracking data, super important. Even if it's basic, having something in place is better than nothing.
For sure. As my CPA sends me P&Ls, month over month, and as you're in this industry longer, you start to look at them differently. It's like you look at the line items and where your money's going, and then when you're maybe like in the instance you said, looking for the next payday or commission check from a deal you closed, you relook at those P&Ls to see how your money's allocated, and your strategy changes over time of where you want to spend your money, whether it's marketing, more services and CPAs, et cetera. So
Yeah, absolutely. When you get into business, you don't know what you don't know, and that never changes. But
never.
for you, when you got into the business, there's so much to learn. At what point did you start to treat real estate like a true business and not just a job? Because there's a mental mindset shift that has to happen there.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. I would say probably 2 years in, because my first year was a very slow year, and learning the ropes, getting to know the right people in the industry. The second year kind of took off for me, and then it's kind of been an uphill climb from there, which has been great. But the second year kind of dialed me in, and I think that's once again once you see a little bit more income come in, your knowledge starts to compound. It triggers your brain differently of like how we're going to structure this. And then also I think maybe year 3 or 4, when you've kind of maybe hit your capacity, you're like, how did I even get through that year? What, how did I do this many deals? What was my stress level, et cetera? You start underwriting and thinking about things in your mind. You're like, that really wasn't sustainable, especially if you have another big life change, such as a kid, or you get married, or just a big life change. So those things will help make you fine tune processes as well. But there's definitely different things along the way.
Absolutely. I know that you have had a good amount of success. You're a realtor in Central Kentucky, and which, for those that don't know the real estate market in this area, Central Kentucky is a very, very competitive, hard place to build a real estate business as a realtor specifically, just because there's so many realtors out there. A lot of people get their license, they maybe do one transaction or never do one at all. So there's a lot of realtors that don't know what they're doing. For you, you've done a good amount of volume in terms of number of transactions in the last 6 years. Which year was your best, and how many did you do?
Sure. On average, I'd say I do between like 20 and 30 deals a year. Last year, I think I did mid. I don't know the exact number that I did, but ballpark. That's how many deals that I aim to do a year, and that's split between buyers, sellers is always the vision out of the gate. But in this business, you never know as you're working open houses or meeting new people, creating new relationships. Things can go different ways.
It's very consistent, and for Central Kentucky's market, that's very strong. How have you, I guess, what systems or processes did you put in place in order to get to that point of consistency in your business?
Yes, for me, it's simple. It's very simple. It's just like show up every day. Every day. It's like you got to have plans to prospect. You got to have plans to follow up on current deals that are under contract or in the pipeline. So it's truthfully treating it like a business. And I've done that from day one. I'm just wired that way. I like to work, have a strong work ethic. So I think if you have that, over time, as that, effort compounds, there's nothing but, positive results, in my opinion. If you're hanging around the right folks in the industry, you're constantly learning. As you said, you only know what you know. I'm still consuming things today that, pivot strategies and way that I serve clients. So everything's evolving. Just trying to stay plugged in and be consistent. And that's the best way to learn.
Absolutely. I started my career in real estate as well. And, one of the most valuable things I learned along the way is the wisdom of learning from other people's mistakes. In addition to your own, what are some, maybe one or two mistakes that you've made along the way that you've learned from in business?
Sure. I think maybe the biggest mistake, the first one that comes off the off top of my head, is just being fired from a client. I feel like that happens from time to time. Personalities clash. You try to over agent. You try to want to make sure you're extending the value that they see, and sometimes it just doesn't come across the way that you would want it to for a client. So that happens. Relationships go different ways, and that's okay. So that's been something I've learned along the way, and every agent has one of those stories. They would have to, or if as they start to serve more people, or and in the industry longer, it will happen eventually. Somebody will say, "Hey, I think this isn't working. We need to go a different direction." So that's the first biggest challenge that I feel like I've learned, just working, like I said, with different personalities in the industry.
Okay. Zach, you mentioned having a budget earlier for your family. I would talk a little bit more about that. How do you create your budget? How do you track it? Is it just for your family income? Do you have a separate one for your business?
Mhm.
How do you approach your budget?
Sure. Our approach is maybe a little bit different than some folks in the industry. I saw a fun post. This is a little bit off track, but I'll dial it back in. I saw a realtor post the other day. What is your biggest expense when it comes to your business? Lo and behold, it was health insurance. I think out of the majority, which was wild. I mentioned that just for budgeting, for the fact that some people don't have spouses that work. Or do work, so everybody's budget's going to look a little bit different. In my case, my wife does work, so we try to simplify it as very simple as we try to live off her income and invest everything from the real estate side. So that's how we've built it. Is sometimes it doesn't happen that way. We have 3 kids in school, so things pop up and we have to dip into the other side of the income bucket. But that's how we structure our plan. And like I said, they could always change, but that's our vision. Who knows? Maybe she could step back a little bit too, and that kind of recalibrates. But the ball is always moving. But we have an allocation, and we track everything just so we know we're not overspending. I feel like in this economy, we're pushed with all these things to consume and buy, and we just try to live pretty simple lives, and try to be just involved with our family.
Yeah. And I want to come back to the volume of transactions that you're doing. You mentioned that you've built your business based on relationships. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are self employed think that that is an outdated approach and that you can't build a business that way. Clearly, that's not the case. And so, in terms of your budget and how you've built your business based on relationships, do you also allocate a certain portion of your revenue to cold marketing at all, or are you just doing relationship based marketing?
All relationship based marketing. I've
It's
never
incredible.
spent a dollar on cold leads or any bit of that. The only thing I did out of the gate was I leaned into mentors and learned from them, and work some clients. They had met along the way that they needed to assist with, but never worked anybody cold.
Do you have any like practical, really simple tips that is something you learned from your mentor that helped you with getting more warm referrals from your network?
Sure, our firm talks about it a lot. There's no hidden secrets, but really it's just, out of the gate, we created a list of 100 relationships we had to, let people know you're in the business. And then as you transact over time, you just need to keep in touch with the folks that you close business with after you close. In this industry, I think there's a statistic that's pretty high, above 75% of people who transact real estate with one specific agent do not return to that agent, and I think that's due to, they don't keep in contact with them after the sale. So we have processes in place to follow up with them, at the 2 week mark, at the month mark, and then yearly anniversaries as well, to check in to see if we can be of help. And then we're also staying in contact via mail and email. So our goal is never to lose contact. And I think that's a golden nugget for any person in the real estate industry.
So you're staying top of mind with your network, your center of influence, and you have systems and processes and tools that help remind you to reach out to your network to continue to build that relationship.
100%.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's a good plug for the web app I've been building, Cash Flow Optimizer. It has that built in, that very functionality. If you need a tool that is more than a CRM, something that will prompt you to reach out to your network automatically so you can come into to the workday each day and know exactly what to do. You don't have to think about it, and you can check things off. Check out the Cash Flow Optimizer. The link will be in the description below. Zach, thank you so much for meeting with me today. It's been a pleasure getting to talk to you and learn more about your business and your experience. I admire you a lot, and you have built a good business, and I know you'll continue to do well in real estate. It's 6 years, and you're still at the beginning of your career too. So that's really incredible to hear. So thank you again for joining. And for those watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next one.